Thanks for saying yes to hanging out with me once again in the world of running behind. I'm Joey Metzger, your host and guide on this journey into the world of slow. Although today, folks, we are not slow. No, in fact, today we are at full lactic threshold pace to keep up with my guest. My guest has made the Olympic qualifying for marathon multiple times. In fact, my guest runs a 2:18 marathon PR, which, with super shoes is like a 2:08. My guest has podiumed at UTMB multiple times and has come in top 5 at Western States. My guest has won many major trail races and has created one of the premier trail race events in North America. So what the hell is he doing on a Back of the Pack podcast? Well, as you will find out, my guest is a great advocate for runners of all abilities and all speeds. And my guest is a champion for causes that affect us all. And not only that, he's a super cool dude with the best hair in the business. So, lace up the fastest shoes you got and get ready to crush it, because today we are running with... Oh, hell, I'm not going to spoil it. You'll just have to listen. For my running behind audience, I am super excited. My guest today, I have no idea why the hell he said he agreed to this, but he is not a back of the packer. He is very much a front of the packer, but here's why I want him on, because I believe, and I think we're going to find out, that this is somebody who supports runners of all abilities and all speeds, including us at the back of the pack. In fact, sir, I have a quote from a pod you did last year. This is what you said, quote, "To just make it explicit that everybody's capable of moving and everybody should be celebrated for what they're able to do." So, and not only that, sir, I believe you are a champion for causes that affect us all, whether we're slow runners, fast runners, or whether we don't run at all. You are shedding a light on things that need to have a light shed on them. So, I am super stoked. I'm super excited. I would like to introduce the head crafter himself, Mr. Tim Tollefson. Tim, how the hell are you, and why the hell are you on my podcast? What are you
Joey,
thinking?
thank you so much for having me. It's, I don't know. I think I live by that philosophy of say yes. You just don't know what will happen, and you meet really cool people along the way. So if I can squeeze in a little extra in the pack schedule, I'm going to say yes. And so when you dropped in and with that inquiry, I just thought, why not? It'd be cool to connect with you. So it's, I don't know, what you just read, it sounds much more eloquent than what I ever say. So I'm not sure if that was, I don't know, maybe AI had something to do with that quote.
No, Tim, I've listened to several of your podcasts in the last week when you said yes, and you are a great interviewee. You just, your responses are awesome, and I love how articulate and intelligent you are. So, Tim, you've never heard my podcast. I'm sure you haven't. Please, I know you haven't. Please know that I am no Debo. I am no Dylan Bowman here. So, but I do like to start these off with a fun little thing, a little icebreaker. So I have, Tim, give me one word that describes you as a runner.
One word that describes me as a runner. That's tough.
Right? Don't let Debo steal this. He's got his question. I've got mine.
Curious.
Oh, I like that. Very good. Now, Tim, one word that describes you, Tim, as a person. One word. It can, sometimes it's the same word, sometimes it's completely different. So,
average.
Oh, really? Average.
I feel like I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. Maybe that's the yes theory of just
all right.
Going with whatever. I get bored and I want to do something new.
Got it. Okay, average. I mean, a lot of my listeners are going to be like, what the hell, average? Okay. All right, we like it, though. I accept all answers. There are no bad answers. So a lot of my listeners are going to know exactly who you are. I think I said in my note to you, have you ever listened to the Smartless podcast with Jason Bateman and Sean Hayes? And
Yes.
You know how Sean has his sister in Wisconsin, Tracy, that they explain some of the inner Hollywood and acting stuff to? I have I have five sisters, and some of them, including my sister Madonna in Manhattan, listens to this, and she has no frickin' idea who Tim Tollefson is. So bear in mind, sometimes we're going to do a little history of who Tim is, and a lot of that is for Madonna in Manhattan. So just bear with us. So Tim, let's get started. You're born in Minnesota. You're one of us, right? When did you end up in California?
Heck yeah. I ended up in California when just before I turned 11. So,
Okay.
through fifth grade was in Minnesota, but then my parents headed west. They were kind of tired of the snow and the two seasons.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I miss Minnesota. It's such a great place.
I love it. And, it's kind of a hotbed for ultra trail runners. I mean, you've got Courtney, you've got Scott, you. I don't want to list myself in there, but, a lot of good runners came out of Minnesota.
Oh,
So
there's literally dozens of top world class, either ultra or even just
yeah.
track athletes, marathoners. It's insane.
Okay, here's a stupid question that you've gotten 1,000 times. You're not related to Carrie, right?
I am
Carrie
not.
Tollefson. No, I knew that. I had to ask it because people ask it all the time. All right, so you move out to California when you're 10. Is that when you start? And I always, this is a silly question. I ask all my guests. It's like, as a kid, I did no athletics. As an adult, I'm starting to do trail running, stuff like that. I'm actually more athletic as an adult. I'm very much a nerd. Always have been. Did you do was California when you started getting into track and stuff like that, when you started running and getting active?
Absolutely. As you know, Minnesota, it was hockey, it was soccer, it was maybe some baseball, but running at that age for me was not anything it was on my radar. But California, I had to trade the stick for just soccer, and then it naturally became running. And we relocated to Rockland, which is only 15 minutes from the Auburn track, the finish line of Western States.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I was introduced to Western States in the mid 90s when I first got to California.
Okay. So is it like in grade school, high school, where you start, going, holy shit, I'm pretty good at this running thing? When did you discover that Tim Tollefson's pretty freaking fast?
It would have been middle school.
Okay.
Like a lot of kids, my true introduction was the timed mile that we had to do in fifth and sixth grade. I think almost every single student has to. But then probably in seventh and eighth grade, started recognizing I had a knack for it and I could move kind of quickly. But thankfully at that time, or at that age, you're only doing 1 mile and 2 mile races. And when I got into high school, I literally hated the 5K. I thought I was going to die. 3 miles was so far. And so it took me a long, long time before I truly embraced that maybe I was better the longer things went. I wanted to be a miler like every kid in America.
Yep. Oh my God, that's so funny. So is it, do you start winning track meets in high school then? Is that when did you, and I tried to look a little bit on your history. I know some from some of your podcasts, but did you get a scholarship to college because you were that good in high school, or how did that work for you to get into college track?
No. So I would say my peaks, I was really good in seventh grade. Then I wasn't so good in high school. And I mean, I was not recruited. I never made the state meet as a cross country or track runner. I walked onto a program at Chico State, and thankfully this was the early aughts, so 2003, where you still could walk onto programs. I don't think that exists in the NCAA really anymore. And over my 5 years at university, I slowly got better and better, where my fifth year, I did make scholarship. I got $1,000 my senior year to be a runner. So I felt like I had made it. I was like, man, I just paid for one textbook. And, but yeah, that was kind of my thing. I think back to the beginning, I feel like a jack of all trades, master of none. I wanted to get better at running. I really did. All my teammates and, roommates were really good. They were state champs and that kind of stuff. And I just longed for that. But I felt like I was just chipping away little by little. And I think that's probably why I'm still in the sport almost 20 years later, is that I feel like I just am still trying to get better.
Still trying to get better. Wow, that's crazy. Do you stay in touch with some of your college coaches and teammates?
Oh yeah, a lot of them. Like my college coach and one of my best friends, we were on a text thread that we were texting earlier today about what's happening in the NCAA, and then
Okay.
they follow the trail scene. So yeah, it's really cool.
Okay. So for Madonna in Manhattan and some of my audience that don't know the history of Tim Tollefson, so you was it steeplechase or the marathon that you were at the Olympic qualifiers for?
That was the marathon.
It was. Okay. Did you do steeplechase first and then transition to the marathon? How did that transition happen?
So that dovetails off of my collegiate experience. Back then, if you weren't very good, they threw you in the steeplechase. So that's where I ended up. And but I think it also, like, we know that to be good at steepling, you have to be athletic, injury resilient. And so in college, the steeplechase was my jam. That was what I competed at mainly. And post collegiately, I did a few more, and I had the aspirations of qualifying for the Olympic trials in the steeple, but I never did. It ended up being the marathon. And kind of over the last, I don't know, after graduating, my wife and I spent the next 4 to 6 years really just chasing marathon times around the country. And that was the big focus. And ultimately, we did both qualify for the Olympic trials multiple times.
Wow. So you went to what years did you go to the Olympic trials for the marathon?
2012 in Houston.
Okay.
2016 in LA.
Okay.
And then I missed Atlanta in 2020 and 2024. My wife made all of them, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. She made the Olympic team.
Olympic trials.
Okay. All right. Well, this is fine.
For our Wisconsin friends that need...
For Madonna in Manhattan and Tracy in Wisconsin, yes.
Yeah. So making the Olympic trials is a small cohort of runners that then have an opportunity to make the Olympic team. And so depending on the year, that Olympic trial standard will allow anywhere between maybe 50 and 100 US athletes into the race that can qualify 3 people to the Olympics. So I never made the Olympics, but I did make it into that small pool of runners that had the opportunity of making the Olympics, but came up short. Quite a bit short.
Yeah. Well, okay. Your marathon time, I think I read, is what is it again? What's your fastest marathon?
2:18:26.
Oh my God.
And hey, let's make it. No, I want it heard. This was a decade before super shoes. So like,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It was probably like a 2:08.
Yeah, that's a 2:08 if you rate it, with the super shoes. Oh, that's great. Now, have you ever run? So you came up a little bit short in the Olympic qualifying, but have you ever run some of the big marathons like Boston or New York or Berlin or any of the big ones? Have you ever done any of those? And what was that experience like?
I've done a number of the majors, and they're exciting. I mean, when you're on the start line with 40 to 50,000 people behind you, like that energy is unparalleled. And then because you're in these cities of millions and millions of people, the crowd support is pretty fantastic. So I cherish a lot of those memories as some of my fondest in running in general. Sometimes you'll hear of trail runners kind of like, I don't know, holding their nose high to the marathon, but I love the marathon. I love tarmac, and it will always hold a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, I, like all of us, I started, with a little half marathon, and my wife, and I've talked about this on my other podcasts, in her heyday, she qualified for Boston twice. She was quite the marathoner. She was super, in my book, super quick, not 2:18 quick, Tim, but she was super quick. And I've never run a marathon on the road. I've done it on the trail, but I admire that. And I think that's really cool. I can see the appeal of it with the crowd. My wife is always like, I don't understand trail running. There's like, there's no music. There's not 1,000 people there. What the hell are you doing? I'm like, it's fun. It's nature. You get to see some cool stuff and walk up hills. Okay. So you do the Olympic qualifying. When do you discover trail running, Tim? How does that happen where you're like, oh God, this is trail running is cool, and I'm actually damn good at it. I take third at UTMB. Spoiler alert.
I kind of like I referenced, trail became on my radar like in the mid to late 90s, just because in the west side of the Sierra where I was going to middle school and high school, I had coaches that were doing Western States. So I was always aware of it. But at that time, like most high school and then eventual collegiate kids, we all thought we were hot shit because we ran fast. And these people that do ultras, it's like, I don't know, they're just walking out there. Like, that's not very impressive. So it took me quite a while before I recognized and appreciated the difference and really the skill set necessary to be good at trails and ultras. And after a few years of being frustrated with the marathon, chasing times and going through 6-month training blocks for one opportunity to get faster, and then I literally ran the exact same time to the second in the marathon, I was just frustrated. I was like, man, I'm pouring so much into this, and I feel like I'm kind of hitting a ceiling. And I had some buddies that were diving headfirst into the trail world, and at the same moment, I watched them with opportunity and experiences that I kind of longed for. And so I started picking their brains about what was going on. And that was back in 2013, 2014. And so that was sort of my peak seriously into the sport of trail and ultra from that curiosity standpoint of, okay, what would it look like to get involved with these longer distances? Like, I always knew it was something I'd be interested in, but it kind of like aligned with just frustration of, I don't know, maybe feeling like I wasn't realizing improvements on the roads. And so it gave birth to this, like, let's go see what the trails are about.
Nice. What was your first ultra marathon on the trails? Do you remember? Which one was your first?
Flagline 50K up in Bend, Oregon, at the end of September in 2014. Yes. Yeah.
What was the elevation gain? Was it a 50K? 50K? What was the elevation gain?
About 4,000 feet of gain.
Okay.
And
how did your day go, Tim? How did it go?
It went all right.
Did you win? Did you come in first?
I did.
And so you were hooked. You were like, okay, this is it. This is my jam. I found it. This is it. Not going back.
Yeah.
Nice. What was your first 100-mile race?
UTMB.
No way. Are you serious?
In 2016.
Okay, I tried, again, I'm no Dylan Bowman here. I know he's great with facts and figures.
He has like a crew of researchers that are just feeding him information.
Freaking spreadsheets and Ryan Thrower and, Harmony giving him information. But I did write down a couple of things. So are you freaking serious? Your first UTMB 2016, that was your first 100-mile race?
It was.
And how did you do, Tim, that day? I know how you did. How did you do for Madonna in Manhattan?
Madonna, I finished the race. I made it.
You did a little better than that, didn't you?
I did. I ended up getting third place.
Oh, my God. Okay, for Tracy, Wisconsin, Madonna in Manhattan, UTMB is, not arguably, is the biggest trail race. Probably the most well-known, most established, biggest crowds, biggest trail race in the world. And it is incredibly difficult because it's in the Alps. You go through like 4 countries, and Americans historically have not done well there other than Jim Walmsley and Tim Tollefson and Zach, maybe, right?
On the men's side, women
on the men's side, very good. Yeah.
If we go way back, but you're right. You like let's paint the picture, or kind of set the table. UTMB is the largest, most competitive, and kind of historically important ultra in our world. And, some people liken it to, the Boston or the Super Bowl, or, in our trail niche part of the endurance community, that is what everyone's training for. That's what people want to qualify for. That's what you want to go to. And, impressively, American women have done very well with multiple wins, including the very first one in 2003. Chrissy Mill, she won. And then we've had a bunch of other women actually take titles. But you are right. American men struggled for a very long time. And
except for a small handful, including my guest today. Because the next year, 2017, how did you do at you went back to UTMB? How did you do, Tim?
It went well again. Yeah.
Well, again, did you take 25th? Because 25th would be great out of 1,000+ people. How'd you do in that one?
I think I got third again.
Yeah, he got third.
Forever a bridesmaid, Joey.
I know, but still third at UTMB. Come on. So I wrote down a few of your career highlights. He's taken first at Javelina 100. You took first at UTMB Trail Australia, right?
Ultra Trail Australia.
Ultra Trail Australia. What? Okay, here's a question I wrote down for you. What, of your career so far, first off, what's your favorite race to run? Is it UTMB? Is it Western States? I think I know, but I want you to tell my audience what your favorite race to run is in terms of trail races.
I'm curious. You think you know?
Of course I do. Of course I do. It's
Okay.
Western States. I mean, Christ, it's right down the road from you, and you're always like talking about the wait list and come on.
And I hope all my friends over at States don't disown me and don't let me show up, but my favorite race is actually Lavaredo.
No way.
Tell
me about that race. Where is it?
It's in the
What is it?
Italian Alps out in Cortina, so northeastern Italy.
Okay.
And it's just spectacular. The race itself does this giant loop through terrain that is far prettier and more challenging than UTMB.
Oh my gosh.
But it has this excitement of these big races. But the little known secret, UTMB is actually probably like 20%, 25% like road, and connecting all these villages. Like you're actually on pavement and like dirt roads for a lot of it. There are beautiful sections, don't get me wrong, but just logistically to connect that many countries and towns, you are in and out of a lot of service roads. And so Lavaredo is mainly trail, and the Dolomites are just a spectacular zone, like area of the world. And so
that's in the Dolomites.
Yep, in the Dolomites.
Oh, wow.
That's my favorite.
Oh, my God.
Western States is a close second.
Well, okay. Tim, I've got 50 listeners, and chances are that, the Billy and Debo and the rest of the board from Western States is not listening.
So we're safe.
Fine. You're safe. This is a safe place. This is a safe place, What happens on Joey's podcast stays on Joey's podcast. So Lavaredo, that's your favorite one, huh? Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Very good.
Unfortunately, it falls on the same day as Western States each year.
Okay.
That's why many may not know it.
Okay. And for Madonna in Manhattan and Tracy, Wisconsin, Western States Endurance Run is probably second to UTMB as the biggest, most well-known 100-mile race in the world. It's held every year in June near Tim in Auburn, California. Starts by Lake Tahoe at the Olympic Valley, and they run 100 miles. And it was originally a horse race and now has become a foot race. You did pretty well at that in 21. That was kind of your best year at Western States, right?
Yeah, I ended up 5th place there. That was my first ever Western States. And it was sort of a classic Western States experience. So I think you did a great job of painting what States is. Minus, it's one of the hottest races in the world, is known for the heat. Yeah. And it kind of like chews up its competitors. And I fell victim to that, where I succumbed to the 110 degree temperatures in the canyons and kind of had a big pity party, but I turned it around and I finished it out, which I'm very proud of, and got 5th place. So that's something I will always cherish.
5th place at Western States. My God. I think about, that's my dream race. I have no idea, but
how many years have you been putting in?
I didn't start running till I turned 50, Tim. I was a nerd most of my life, and I did a little weightlifting in my 40s. And then when I turned 50, I started jogging. I'm still kind of just jogging. But I've been doing trail runs a few years, but I like the beautiful areas. I like, I'm an ordinary person, so I like taking on extraordinary challenges. So it's just fun. I enjoy it. Finish, DNF, whatever. I enjoy it. DFL, that's happened to me. So Western States, question for you before we move on. I want to talk about some other things. who are you picking this year? Now the gym's out, and I gotta know, who are you picking? Again, safe place. This Dylan's not going to hear
Yeah,
this.
because
No
you
one's going to hear
said
this.
like 10 people are listening, right? Except for Madonna and
Yes, my sister Madonna, she doesn't know what the hell Western States is. So go ahead. Who do you think is
all
winning
right.
this year, Tim?
All right. I mean, Joey, I got to go with my boy Rod Farvard. He got second place last year.
Everybody's forgetting about him.
I know, and I think it's a good thing because he burst onto the scene last year with a second place. Yeah. He led Jim across the river at mile 80. That's never happened in the history of Western States. The kid proved that he belongs there. However, to your point, people have kind of forgotten about him because there's so many other good athletes. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to play into his favor. He does well as an underdog. If you can call second place, third fastest time ever at Western States an underdog. But I want to lean into that, and I think Rod can take the dub.
Love it. Love it. It's recorded here, so when he wins, we'll play this back.
Yes.
Very good. I want to transition in, and I want to be respectful of your time, but I want to talk a little bit. And like I told you, you can talk as little or as much as you would like. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, and I know you have talked openly about some of the struggles you've had with different issues like eating disorder, and some OCD issues and things like that. Can you want to talk a little bit about those issues? And what I kind of wrote was like, when did those happen, Tim? And how? I know recovery is a constant thing. It's not like, well, I'm all better. It's a constant battle. It's a constant process. But I would be appreciative, my listeners would be appreciative for just kind of hearing, Tim, the elite runner, how did you deal with a couple of those issues? When did they occur? And how are you today? How are you handling them? What's working for you?
Thank you, Joey. So I would say, it's kind of a continuum of like things shifting and changing throughout your life. But I started noticing maybe some of those intrusive thoughts that are classic with an OCD type disorder or related kind of condition when I was in Minnesota. So like, early days, 7, 8, 9 years old. And then probably like a lot of kids raised in the 80s and 90s, you kind of just suppress emotion and you're not really, encouraged to be open about things. And it's like, hey, let's just, rub some dirt on it and keep going. And so, I would say things really started to like manifest more and more in high school, but that's a typical age also where you're just striving to try and fit in. And so anything that makes you feel, abnormal or unique, you tend to shy away from. Yeah. And so then as I entered into college where, it's ripe for competition and you're in athletics, especially in endurance sport like cross country and track, that's where like the eating disorder stuff really started to take like, significant root. Because again, this would have been, early 2000s where culturally things weren't talked about as much as they are now, which I am appreciative of. But back then, it was, people are pretty open about like their eating disorders, disordered eating. And it was kind of almost like a badge of honor. It's horrible to say, but people like openly just kind of like, there was this prevalence that was pervasive in the sport. And so I was definitely like, ripe for the, I guess, kind of like, I don't know, being influenced and trying to still find a way to fit in. So throughout my college years is where like I battled my eating disorder the most. And that kind of like, allowed things to really surface and become more of an issue. But it wasn't until probably another decade past that I finally sought help to like figure things out. And like a lot of people, it kind of came at, a time where I just felt like I was really starting to lose grasp on holding things together. I think anyone that's struggling with personal issues, you find a way to navigate and save face and not really let people understand that you might be dealing with something because, it's sort of self-preservation. But there does come a point where either from exhaustion or necessity or maybe hitting a rock bottom that you start to realize like, okay, like things aren't okay. And I need to like let some people in. And that's what happened with me. And so, yeah, it was probably 2020-ish that I finally like started to like, seek actual therapeutic help, and stopped, this is pertinent to just everything we're talking about, stopped using running as an attempted replacement for coping or therapeutic intervention, where I think, we all find that running is a wonderful outlet. It can enhance our lives, and it can help us process and deal with and, explore different aspects of our mental, physical, emotional, spiritual being. But it should never be a replacement for actual, therapeutic help if that's something you're seeking. But I think a lot of runners use running as a tool for every situation. And, we need to expand our toolkit beyond just running, because it won't always be there for us. And that's kind of what I started to find.
Yeah. That's what I was curious about, how running affected that, specifically that issue, if it helped or hurt, if, that issue was contributing to, you're wanting to improve your running performance, or like you said, if you're using the running to help, just forget about it. Yeah. So you kind of realize they're two separate things, and you can't solve one with the other.
Yeah. And like with running, it is one of those sports that kind of like falls into, people worry about weight, for performance. And while inherently that is a component, I think it becomes low-hanging fruit that a lot of us latch onto, where you just think, oh, if I keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, I'll get faster and faster and faster. And that's just not true. There's definitely a point of diminishing returns where you start manipulating your body to meet running demands, and you're playing with fire. You really should embrace your own physical structure, your being, and slowly let running kind of dictate how your body adapts. You shouldn't try to manipulate it. And maybe a lot of runners, I fell into that camp of trying to manipulate my body too much, and it led to a lot of injuries. It led to a lot of kind of burnout and things that I wish hadn't happened. Because as a runner, you want to run. That's where we might feel free or explore or meet people and hang out. And you get injured, it feels like that stuff is taken away. And that was a tough and painful lesson.
Wow. And then so you discovered, you're dealing with this, you decided to get help, but you've been very vocal about it, and that is not always the case. What made you decide to be so public and vocal about this? And was that a hard thing the first time that you came out about this and started talking about it publicly? Was that tough?
It was terrifying. I hated it.
It's not this podcast, right? This is not, I'm not breaking news, right? No.
Yeah, it was absolutely paralyzing initially, where I think what I found through years of therapy and talking about things, the more I gave voice to the things that were kind of plaguing me internally, the less power it felt like it had over me. The less the grip was lessening, or it was easing off. And so, some of those intrusive, debilitating, and unwelcomed thoughts that were kind of constantly crashing over my psyche started to dissipate as I spoke, implemented tools that I was learning how to use, and just recognized that so much of the stories I built up in my head, or the things that I just couldn't manage, were addressable. They couldn't completely be removed, but I could start to function better and manage them. And just kind of recognizing that I'm not the only person going through this kind of stuff. So other people need to feel empowered to start a conversation, or ask for help, or self-study. And that was ultimately the reason for starting to be vocal, because I didn't want to be the face of this kind of stuff, but I was okay being part of the conversation, because I knew that it would help someone like me. And I wish I had had those resources when I was a teenager. I wish I hadn't waited till I was 35 to start addressing the things, and so I felt it was sort of I don't know. I felt like it was an important thing to kind of pay forward to the next generation, and just make people realize they're not alone, and that it's okay to talk about these difficult things.
Yeah. That's great. I recently interviewed, the guy's name is Joe Harden. He's also a podcaster on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. And he's a sober runner, but he had to hit his rock bottom. And for him, it talking about it really helps his sobriety. It really is part of the journey. Part of the recovery, part of the healing is talking about it, being vocal about it. So I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Mammoth Trail Fest, but I want to anything more you want to say about this before we move on, because I want to be respectful of this topic and where you're at with it.
I would, I think you make a really good point with, like sobriety, is that there are a lot of parallels between, things that people are struggling with. And, all of us have, I don't know, issues or things that we feel like we may be the only person that has ever lived, experienced, or thought certain things. And the reality is, we're not special. Someone else has had it.
Yep.
But the moment you make that kind of realization and accept that, hey, like I'm not alone in this, I think it does allow you to take that step forward, an important step to hopefully improve your state if that's what you're seeking. And so I would just encourage people, talk to someone close to you. You don't have to be public about it, but like find someone to talk to. It's so important to have relationships where you can actually get things out of your head, because it often is going to help you process things better.
Yeah. That old adage is really true. The first step is admitting that you have a problem, admitting that there's something not okay going on. That's the first step. So, Tim, thank you for that. I appreciate it. My 50 listeners, maybe this will affect somebody. I have no idea, but I want to talk about Mammoth Trail Fest. My God, I am so excited. I am signed up for it. You were so nice last year. Of course, my dog Ricky, he's hanging in there. He's having a tough time, but we're doing the best we can with him. But so we are going to drive him out there. I'm knocking on wood that he will still be with us, and we will drive him out there. But we're planning to come out. I want to talk about Mammoth Trail Fest. So for Madonna, Manhattan, and Tracy, Wisconsin, Tim had created this wonderful trail race event, which is become, I don't think anybody would argue, this has become one of the premier trail running events in North America. When I first saw it, I was like, I think one of your website was like, it's kind of like UTMB. And I looked at the town of Mammoth and I'm like, oh my God, yeah, this is closest to UTMB I'm going to get. So, you mean anybody can sign up for this? I don't have to qualify and get some stones. So let's talk about Mammoth Trail Fest. When did you decide to create a race? And what made you decide that? And then I want to talk about, I just had a couple of friends who are race directors in the Minnesota area on last week. And I want to talk to you about how difficult is that, getting permits, logistics, volunteers. I want to hear all the shit, Tim. How did you come up with this idea? What were you thinking?
Lindsay, my wife, asks me that all the time. Like, what were you thinking? Why did you do this? Yeah. I mean, I would say honestly, the seed was planted back at my very first 100K UTMB in 2015. I was fresh off of a road running career of marathoning, and I dove into the trail world, headed out to Chamonix, experienced this incredible event, and it kind of married my love for road events like you were describing, world majors, where there's so much energy, so many people. But then you have like the beauty, the drama, the landscapes, the stories, so much more richness. And it blended those two worlds together to me that I didn't really know existed. So that was sort of like the little seed of inspiration. And then over the next 5 years of being able to travel the world and go to events, I started just like, taking note of things that I love, places that made me feel welcome, things that I thought maybe would be really neat to implement someday. And all this while training and living in Mammoth Lakes, which would argue is the most beautiful place in America with the best trails. We had nothing here. And it was just one of these like, how is this possible? Like, why is there not an event here? And that led to, okay, like, how are we going to make an event here? And So I think over, maybe 5, 6 years, I started ideating, writing things down, dreaming up a lot of different routes, running the routes, what the races we now have, that was years and years of just like trial and error and like thinking about the route and the direction of like, okay, when Joey's going this way, where's the sun going to be? What's the view going to be? Would it be better that way, this way? So it wasn't just like, oh, let's map out 31 miles and call it good. It was like, no, every area and turn should have purpose. And then it took quite a while. And then I was very close to launching something. And then there was this global pandemic that like hit, and it kind of like delayed things a couple years. But that was sort of like the idea behind it, but also kind of what we were speaking about earlier. Like part of why I didn't launch TrailFest earlier is the fear of perfection. Like I wanted everything to be perfect. And that was, some of the other just psychological things I've always been challenged with is like, okay, like perfection led to this paralysis of not doing anything. And so I eventually had to kind of face this, and a lot of this came through therapy. Is like, hey, like, what's the worst that could happen? And like you start working backwards. You're like, okay, like all my fears aren't going to be realized, so we should just go take a crack at this. And so finally in 2022, we launched the first edition of TrailFest, and now we're entering our 4th year, and it's wild how much it's grown. But I'm not surprised in the sense. The whole idea behind TrailFest was let's celebrate community, the beauty of the Eastern Sierra, give people opportunity to connect and grow and challenge themselves. And I think with that intention, it was like we were going to be successful no matter what. I feel like it's because we had a clear goal of what we wanted to create for our runners, and everything we do is checked by, is this good for our runners? We could get drawn in 1,000 different ways, and there's a lot of temptation, but it's like coming back to that, like, okay, is this good for our runners? Then yes, let's do it.
Yeah. I remember watching a couple of free trail videos of you. I think you were doing something about getting back to Western States, and it must have been Ryan who filmed it, but you're there in, the Eastern Sierras training. And I was like, before you'd ever created Mammoth Trail Fest, and I was like, holy crap, look at the scenery. And then you created Mammoth Trail Fest, and I was like, oh my God, that was in the movie. I got to check that out. So, did you think, did you hope that it was going to be as big as it's going to be? Did you like go, oh, this is going to take off, this is going to be massive? Or did you go, I might have a few hundred people? What was your thinking before that first year?
First year, so I guess I did dream of, I wanted this to be big, with a very important asterisk of big while not compromising the individual experience. Because I've had the privilege of going to UTMB 10 times. And I love UTMB, but it's changed a lot in a decade. And even for me, it's kind of like now I go there and I get lost in the chaos, and it's a healthy reminder of we don't want to get to that point, but we do want to welcome a lot of people, because I think that's what's cool about these events is it allows opportunity for you to come and meet some new people, or like you said at the top of the conversation, Mammoth might be like the people's UTMB because you don't need stones. It's accessible, like the barrier is lower. And like, I want to do our best to preserve that, because we want people coming in that are new. And what's cool about TrailFest is we actually find we have a high percentage of first timers running an ultra, which is wild to think about, because we are high altitude, we're alpine, it's difficult, but it's also approachable enough that people are doing it. And, so if you come and you stumble or you fail or you get DNF'd, we still want you, and we're going to pick you up, and like, you're going to hopefully have a good time. And so I did have the vision of, I wanted to build it big. I think it took off probably a bit quicker than I thought, which has stress tested our operations team a lot. But thankfully, like each year we grow with it, and it's been wild. But it's been a fun ride.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, I am the back of the pack crowd. So I looked at your event and I'm like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. This looks amazing. Tim is creating it. It's going to be good. And this is a quote that's on your website, and I was jotting this down as I was writing up these notes. At Trail Fest, quote, at Trail Fest, we celebrate every runner from cutoff chasers to course record breakers. And I remember seeing that, and I'm like, okay, this is for me. I'm signed up for the 50K, but you have a 12-hour cutoff. I live at sea level, Tim, so I don't know if you've got any high altitude tips for me. I'm going to get there a few days early, but I'm like, even if I get cut off and I don't make, I'm still going to have a great time. Here's my goal, Tim, is I want to get to, obviously I want to get to the top of Mammoth Mountain before that cutoff. I think if I make that cutoff, I've charted it all out. I'm like, okay, I think if I make that cutoff, I'm good. But that's the one I'm really got to push for. So that's,
and I think I believe in you, Joey. We've had people over the last couple of years. I'm thinking of one woman in particular. She got cut off at the summit, but she came back, and the next year she made it past the summit, and like you said, was able then to make it all the way around. And it was heartbreaking to see her get cut off, but also it kind of like, that became her challenge for the next year of like, I'm going to get back there and do it. And then watching her finish, that was even more special.
Wow. So I don't know how I'll do. My training is shit right now, but I'm going to ramp it up. I've got a race here in a few weeks, and I'm going to ramp it up, Tim. I'll be fine. So questions. So 2025, I mean, you just keep growing. You've added, tell everyone what all the different distances and races are, but leave off Mammoth 200, because we're going to talk especially about that. I just watched the film today. Oh my God. I'm just like, I just can't wait. Can't wait for that to happen.
So at Mammoth Trail Fest, we now have 5 events, and working down from distance, 50K is our longest. Then we have a 26K. We have a 10K. We label it our Party 10K. It is at night. You have to have a headlamp. There's nice. Disco inflatable igloo aid station, bumping music. We have a DJ in the village where you start and end. We have like Cirque du Soleil acrobats, basically. Like, it's really a fun atmosphere. Awesome. We have a 5K for those that are looking for something shorter. Now, it does go up a mountain. So
it's a vertical 5K. It's, yeah.
Okay. And then we have a kids race, a 1K. And that actually, this year we have over 100 kids already signed up, which is really cool. So those are our 5 distances.
Awesome. And you're still part of the Golden Trail series?
So for 2025, we are not.
Oh, you're not?
Okay. We were for 2023 and 2024. Okay. And then they would like to come back in 2026. And we're currently working through, some discussions around that. Yeah.
So there'll be no elbowing controversies at the
Elbowgate.
Elbowgate. Oh God, that was too funny. Are you still doing all the free trail going to be there and coverage and live streaming and all of that again this year?
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. So, I don't know how I would make it on the live stream unless they're following the back of the pack.
Well, we have live commentary for, I want to say about the 50K, the first 6 or 7 hours, but then we do have just a static cam for the entire thing. So we don't shut off the stream. It will live stream for 12 straight hours. So when you cross that finish line, Joey, you will be on the live stream.
Watch all 12 hours, especially the last few. I might be there. We don't know. I'm so excited. This is going to be just a great time. You've got a new sponsor for the event and for Tim personally, right? We want to talk a little bit about Kraft.
Yeah. So I have now been personally as an athlete with Kraft. I'm in my 3rd year, but it's our 1st year with Mammoth Trail Fest being part of Kraft. And it's been a really good relationship, kind of a true partnership in terms of building this. And what's been neat about it is Kraft, we say Kraft and a lot of people are probably like, huh? Like Kraft mac and cheese? Like, what are we talking about?
But for Madonna in Manhattan, Kraft is not Kraft mac and cheese who you used to work for. It's who, Tim?
But that would be a really badass sponsorship.
Well, yeah.
So maybe
I do hope you have some mac and cheese at the aid stations. We'll talk later.
Maybe we should talk later, Donna. But Craft Sportswear is a apparel and footwear company, and they've actually been making apparel since the 70s. So if people know about Craft, they know Craft for the base layers or Nordic ski gear. So our listeners in Minnesota or throughout the Midwest, they might be familiar.
Yeah.
But over the last decade, they've poured themselves into footwear. So it's new. We kind of label it almost like it's a startup company. And they're creating some really good footwear, and just they've supported me as an athlete, which I've really been appreciative because, I'm getting older, and often in the athletic space, as you start to taper off in results, it's not uncommon for a sponsor to drop you because you're not performing. But Kraft really views their athletic sponsorships differently. They sponsor the whole person, which I really appreciate. And so they've been a wonderful partner to me. And now they've come on board with TrailFest, and they believe in my vision of we should celebrate, like you said, from the cutoff chasers to the course record holders. And they want to be there for all of it. So it's been a really cool thing to build this 4th year with Kraft on our team.
Awesome. And they have super shoes now, right? Carbon plated super shoes. I follow Tommy Ribs because I do a lot of iFit workouts on the treadmill, and I know he's always like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest shoe ever."
Yeah. It's and hopefully I'm working with Tommy right now trying to get him out at TrailFest. So
you are not.
Maybe.
Oh, we all love Tommy Ribs. What a special guy.
Yeah.
So Kraft's a new sponsor. Now, I think we've gotten to the point, Tim. Before we get to Mammoth 200, one other thing I wanted to say is, and this alludes to Kraft and you and everybody. I also watched, I saw some of your posts with Zach Friedley from Born to Adapt. They were there last year. So Zach is his program is called Born to Adapt for adaptive runners. Is that correct?
No, I'm really glad you brought this up, Joey. So Zach Friedley is an incredible person, runner, athlete, and he is an adaptive athlete. He runs with a blade. And so he started an organization called Born to Adapt to create opportunities for adaptive athletes to get into the sport of trail and ultras. Yeah. And so his organization is doing incredible work, and we have been fortunate since last year and entering 2025 to work with him and a few other key adaptive athletes pushing the boundaries for accessibility and advocacy, to have them on site. And we're really excited to have them come back. Last year we had 7 adaptive athletes compete in the 26K. Okay. And then this year we're hoping to have 20 plus adaptive athletes. And some of the cool things we did based on their feedback was, what can be a challenge for adaptive athletes is on a trail, there's varying terrain, and their blades that they're using aren't always good for certain things. So you might have a running blade or a hiking blade, and it actually makes a big difference for them as they're competing or just trying to complete the distance. And so what we did was we allowed them to have what we called prosthetic porters or leg Sherpas, where Zach could start with one blade on his leg, and when he got to the summit, he could have someone switch out his blade for his running leg and then come down, and it was more efficient for him. So we're just listening to him, getting feedback and ideating on hey, why shouldn't we do this? We want more runners in general to participate in trail and ultra. This is a no-brainer. Let's do it. And so we're excited to have them come back this year.
Yeah, I love that, Tim. And you say also on there that you just support underrepresented communities. So that's just so cool. I really, that's cool. You've seen his little film Born to Adapt.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to have a link to it. I watched it and I bawled. It's just so good. Sean, that kid. Oh my God.
So powerful.
Yep. So I'm going to have a links to all this stuff, Tim, so people can check it out. All right. We're there. We need to talk about the 200-mile elephant in the room. So you've got Mammoth Trail Fest. It's going great. And then you decide, not enough. I need a 200-mile race. When did you come up with that? I want to talk about Hillary being the race director. I saw the film you did with Sally and Billy and everybody. Talk about it, Tim. Why did you decide to do a 200-mile race? And how is it connected to Trail Fest? I think it's separate, but it's the week after or something. Let's talk about it.
So Lindsay asks me this all the time. What were you thinking? I mean, I was thinking a lot of things, but one thing in like the big picture of what we've been talking about of like, accessibility or welcoming people into the space and celebrating all runners. I have a lot of friends that do 200-mile races. In Europe, that's a very popular distance. And I've seen events where they have everything from a 200 all the way down to shorter distances. And so in my mind, I thought it would be really neat to connect the two kind of like niches of our already niche community and sport together in one event. Because currently in the US, that doesn't really exist. We have amazing 200-mile events that are standalone events. And so the idea was, hey, let's bring a 200-miler into Trail Fest. And so beginners that are doing their very first 10K or maybe 50K also are exposed to people doing 5-day races. And then people doing 5-day races also can appreciate the people doing their very first event. And so that was kind of the dream. This first year, recognizing the magnitude of putting on a 200 and the importance that we really don't lose sight of how important just our Trail Fest runners are, I decided to gap the two events by a week. So the Mammoth 200 is the following week after Trail Fest. And so basically, it's going to happen on this year, September 26th through the 30th. And the dream moving forward is, maybe bleeding the two together where they're actually officially connected. I got a lot of pushback where people said, where's my 50-miler? Where's my 100-miler? You're going straight to a 200. And, we haven't overlooked it. There's a lot, a lot cranking, but this is something I've been thinking about for years. And some buddies and I mapped out courses and eventually it worked. But to your point about operations, it's taken a very, very, very long time to get it off the ground because the operational side of something like this is just, it's massive. It's
I can't imagine. I mean, like I said, I interviewed my friends who are race directors last week, and they do a 700-person triathlon, and that's insane with all the volunteers. You are doing Trail Fest, all these races, all these aid stations, all these volunteers, the permitting process. How the hell do you get permits to go 200 miles, Tim? Are you dealing with how many entities? Oof. Is it private land? Is it national forest? What are you dealing with just to get I think you said you just got the permits done like maybe a month ago, or something, right?
Yeah, that's a big challenge for this year because, getting the permit. I wanted the permits in place before we started taking people's money, where we could have taken people's money 9 months ago, but I didn't feel good about that. And the flip side of that is now we're 3 months out from a 200 is like how many people are actually going to sign up, but I think we have a dozen different permits that I had to manage for this one. And it goes through BLM, Forest Service, 3 ranger districts, county, some private, town, LADWP, Caltrans, you name it. We kind of have to work with that entity. But the only way this happened, Joey, is through relationships. And in a small town like ours, having been embedded for 15 years, it's a testament to everyone involved, being willing to find a way through, because there were a dozen times where this should not have happened, but we all collectively were like, hey, let's at least flush it out before we say no. And it's just been, a testament to the relationships built, and it could not have happened without that. So I'm forever grateful for everyone involved, just to even give this idea light, where we still haven't had it yet, but I think it's something that excites a lot of us.
How has your community in the town of Mammoth responded to your events? I can only imagine that. I mean, obviously, there's probably some things to deal with, but they must be thrilled with what you're trying to do and raise up that community and the business you're bringing towards it for your races and events, right?
Absolutely, and that's where. When I talk about community for Trail Fest, it's not only our runners as our community, but it's the actual locals as our community. Because as a ski resort, a tourist-based economy, we face a lot of challenges established, municipalities and larger cities do not necessarily, where it's feast or famine in terms of employment opportunities and connections that you can make, because when we are dependent on a ski season, that doesn't last 365 days a year. And so it's not uncommon for what we label shoulder season, which is typically that like May, early June to September, October periods where town just dies and people get laid off. There's not much going on, and it forces people to sometimes relocate. And so with Mammoth Trail Fest falling smack in the middle of shoulder season, that was an intentional move to try to create a stimulus for our economy. And it does benefit our local stakeholders, which is nice, because then we work with them to try to figure out ways that it's like a win-win, and how do we provide a good experience for our runners, but how does it benefit their individual businesses? So I view it as, something that we're all building together. And my hope is that the runners that come into our community feel that, and that we aren't like, oh, tourists are here, please get out of here, which, you live in a tourist town long enough, that does happen.
Yeah.
But what we have found, and what I've always known, is runners are a really cool demographic. Like, generally, they're down to earth, they're super cool, they're grateful for opportunities, and I think it just vibes very well with our locals here. So it's been fun to see that relationship between the two build over the last couple of years.
I bet. That is awesome. Last questions on Mammoth 200, and then I'll let you go here pretty quick. How did you decide on number one, Hillary as the race director, and number two, how'd you decide on Sally being the one to take it out for a test ride?
So Hillary, we've known Hillary for a very long time through Billy, a close friend of ours, and just got to talking with her, and she had a lot of experience in the 200 world of leading the media team for some of these other big 200-mile races in the country. And so she had been steeped in that environment for years, more from the media side, but with talking with her, is like, hey, like, she showed a lot of interest, and Lindsay and I really thought it'd be neat to work with her and mentor her through this first year to make sure that she feels comfortable. And we wanted her to be our race director because, one, I think we need more like female race directors out there. I think also for something this big, it's pretty amazing to have her as our race director. Yeah. And so over the last 9 months, it's been really fun to work with her, coaching her up and getting her ready where she will be, the race director of the Mammoth. And so it's been a really fun process just going through that with her. And so I felt like she was a wonderful fit, and she's excited about it. And for something like this, you really need to love the sport and that kind of niche corner of the sport, because 200s they're still kind of like the stepchild to, overall ultra running. They're gaining in popularity, but it's still a little fringe, which is fun. And Sally, I've known her for a decade, and it was funny. I called her a year and a half ago, and I said, hey, Sally, I have this project. I want to run it by you. I unloaded everything. And she's like, oh my God, Tim, who told you? I wrote down in my notebook, I want to do a 200-mile race, or she wanted to do a 200-mile adventure in the Eastern Sierra. Right. And it just so happened, we were both thinking very similar things. And so when I pitched it to her of hey, do you want to come and unlock the Mammoth and see if it even works? She's like, hell yes, I will be there. Let's go. And that experience was absolutely incredible. And I'm glad you saw the film. It's, I think she did an absolute bang up job portraying it. There was a lot left on the editing floor that we couldn't show, that she didn't want to show, of the true suffering. But anyone that's been around a 200, they probably know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that was a really, really special project to be able to do with so many close friends. And then now it's an event, which is even better. Yeah.
The film, I'll have a link to it. Oh my God, you've got Billy and Hillary and Sally. So Drew is there. You've got the world-class filmmakers. That thing is just phenomenal. I love that you kept in the hallucinations. She comes up to the tree or the rock, and she's like, well, that's a bear, and that's awesome. I love it. I'll have a link to it. So Mammoth 200, how many people have you got signed up for it, Tim?
Currently, we have 130 signed up.
Okay.
And we are probably looking to have maybe another 20 for this first year.
Okay.
We plan on, like TrailFest, growing it year over year. But I think after getting through year one, I would expect it to go very quickly, in terms of signups. So it's exciting, though.
I bet it will. Any names I would know that are running it?
Oh, man. There are so many names. So
really?
This is what's really, and this hasn't come out yet, but we will be live streaming it, which is really exciting.
Awesome.
There's this woman by the name of Tara Dower. I don't know if you've ever heard
God.
of her.
No way. She's running it?
She's running it.
Oh
Corinne Malcolm is running it.
Corinne is? Oh my God.
Timmy Olson, Jeff Browning.
No.
Max
God.
Joliffe.
Oh my God.
I'm butchering it, but we literally have about 15 all-star elites in the field, which is insane. And this is a story that has to be told.
Yes.
And so Finn Melanson is running.
My God.
Yeah, there's some hitters.
This is crazy. So is Jamil's group live streaming it, or who's doing the live stream?
Mountain Outpost.
Oh my God. And then is anybody doing any filming?
I can't say for sure, but of those names I just listed, it's uncommon for any of those people not to do films.
Not to have a film crew. They show up with their own film crew.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't wait. This is so exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome. This is great, Tim. I'm going to, a couple of things. Before, I didn't put it on my notes, but I do want to let you talk real quickly about Runners for Public Lands. I know you're on the board of that. Real quickly, tell my listeners, what is Runners for Public Lands? What are your current challenges? I got to imagine, we don't want to get into politics, but I got to imagine you're dealing with some issues lately. And how can people get involved and how can they help?
Such a generous question. Thank you, Joey. So Runners for Public Lands is a nonprofit organization that I'm a board member of. They've been around for 8 years, and it is a organization dedicated to runners and maintaining access to public lands in its name. And what we found was, historically speaking, despite runners being the largest, most diverse, and frequently outdoor user group in America, with some 60 million people identifying as runners, there was no real collective, fabric or, link to give them a voice, where we think outdoor sports, amazing organization. Yeah. And they do represent runners now, but historically it was like winter athletes. And so Runners for Public Lands was born out of that desire to provide a voice for runners. And now what we have faced, is probably one of our biggest challenges is the access to actual public lands, where we're seeing in some of these most recent proposals that a lot of large chunks, talking millions of acres of public lands, are being potentially offered up for sale. And that would mean privatization and loss of access for a lot of the spaces that many of us like to recreate. And so what we've done as an organization is try to divvy out resources and give runners, especially race directors, a voice to express our concerns around these types of initiatives or proposals. And something I'm really proud of is we've created a race director collective, which we believe is the first of its kind, and we've authored 2 sign-on letters to Congress asking them to fully fund and staff our land management partners, which include the Forest Service, BLM, and Park Service. And our second letter that we sent had over 1,300 races throughout the country, representing 140,000 runners, 40 states and DC, numerous national forests. And it was really neat to see race directors come together and say, yeah, we care about this. And our goal is to keep building that, where we can both give representation to race directors, but also runners indirectly, and protect these experiences that we all love and are striving for, because it's not guaranteed that we're always going to have access to the lands that we're recreating on. You spoke about Western states. it's a dream for a lot of people to run Western States, myself included. I'd love to get back there. But also it runs through Forest Service. It runs through state parks. So there's not a guarantee that Western States has to happen every year. So every year it's a battle to keep getting permits. And so these are things that as a community, if we care about, we need to be part of the conversation. So that's, I guess my spiel for Runners for Public Lands. And if interested, check us out at runnersforpubliclands.org. We have really cool resources, links that you can find trail days if you want to help out with local trails and get your hands in the dirt and give back. A lot of fun things. And so, that's something that I've really enjoyed doing.
Love it. I didn't have that in my original notes, but I thought of that. I thought, we got to mention that. That's great. So Tim, what's before I get to my brilliant closing questions, what is next for Tim Tollefson? I know you're doing the live stream for Western States. Obviously, you've got Trail Fest. That's going to be huge. Any races that we can watch and cheer for you on? Anything on the calendar?
Well,
I follow you on Strava. I see you're just kicking ass all the time, but I'm like, what's he racing for? What you headed for?
So I'm kind of predictable. I'm like a cheap novel. I'm going to go back to UTMB. This is year 10.
Okay.
And so, maybe it will be with the final chapter, put a bow on it, but I want to go back and do that again. So that's the next thing that I'm actually training for. Besides, I will be pacing my buddy Rod at Western States, the final 38 miles. So that's really what I'm training for, because that's a race in itself.
You're pacing Rod?
Yep.
At Western States, so you won't be broadcasting while you're pacing him, right?
No, so I'm going to be doing a lot of the lead up. Every day before Western States, I'll do all the trail gating and commentary, but during the race itself, I'm going to leave that to the professionals like Corinne and Dylan.
Yeah. Well, you do a great job on those. I know I'm not the only one to think that. I love hearing you on all the broadcasts with them. So awesome. So you're pacing Rod. So very, very likely you will be just watching him cross that finish line first, since you've predicted for him to win.
You heard it here first.
There you go. All right. I am so grateful that you decided to do this. My last question for you, Tim, is I do this of all my guests. I have a guy in Ireland who listens. I have listeners all over the world, Tim, for Christ's sake. But he said you should ask your guests what their 5 favorite pieces of gear are. And I understand you're sponsored. Maybe they're all craft. Maybe they're not. But this is a safe place. Tim, give me 5 things that you like to have with you when you go on a run.
Shoes.
Okay.
We'll make them craft shoes. I like my craft shoes.
A particular model you're running in these days?
I do the Nordlight Ultra.
Nordlight Ultra? Okay.
That's my go-to.
Love it. Okay.
Sunglasses.
Okay. Any particular brand or just any?
I rock Julbo.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Shorts. I don't like to go naked.
Yeah, that's that's great.
Sometimes I run with a little Tenkara rod. It's a 10-inch extendable fly rod, and I'll like fish in alpine lakes, and I just throw it in my pack.
Are you Brian Powell? What?
He rubbed off on me. It's
I love it.
And then my last and best piece of gear is just one of those bottle top water filters where you dump in and screw it on, and you can just drink out of any stream, especially here in the Sierra. But I never leave the door without that filter, because if my 1 hour run turns into 5 hours, I need to have water. And so that's one of my most critical pieces.
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Tim Tollefson, thank you so much for coming on my Back of the Pack podcast. And I'll have links to everything we talked about so people can follow you. They can look at your Runners for Public Lands and Mammoth Trail Fest and everything like that. Thanks for coming on the podcast. And I look forward to hopefully meeting you in person in September.
Dude, we're going to give you the biggest hug ever, Joey.
I can't wait. Thanks, Tim. Holy cow, Tim Tollefson. Thank you, sir, for saying yes. That was an absolute thrill and an elite conversation with an elite individual, and I am not just talking about his athletic abilities. If you enjoyed that, do leave the show a rating and review. It really helps grow the pod, and I'll be sure to have links to all those great causes and movies and events that Tim and I talked about in the interview. So that's it for this time. Take care and cheers, and remember, keep running, keep walking, keep moving, and like Tim says, everybody is capable of moving, and everybody should be celebrated for what they're able to do. You will cross that finish line.